longer. This little stand up,
Mm-hmm.
that's how he passed.
I would appreciate it.
He must have gotten caught up somewhere. Mr. Jameson, you knew we were starting back at 1:15.
Oh, I thought you said 1:30.
No, sir, 1:15.
No, sorry.
All right, let's bring the jury in.
Do you have any more people in punishment? Just resubmit and then we're done. You don't want to say anything? Yes.
You ready?
All right.
Here's your phone.
This time.
You may be seated. All right, Mr. Grant, call your next witness.
State resubmits its case in chief and arrests, Your Honor.
What says the defense?
Mr. Guzman, the elder, wishes to testify. Would you come up here, please?
Come on up to the witness stand, sir. If you would please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. You may proceed, Mr. Jameson.
Please introduce yourself to the court and spell your name for the record.
Franco Guzman, Franco-Guzman.
And Mr. Guzman, how are you related to the man on trial, Alfredo Guzman?
Alexander Dominique Guzman is my son.
Okay. And are there other family members in the courtroom on his behalf?
Yes, sir.
Could you identify them for the jury, and as their name is called, they would stand or wave their hand?
It's my wife, Paula Guzman, and my daughter-in-law, Summer Bertrand.
Thank you. Now, sir, you're here today because you want the jury to know some things about your son, is that right?
I do.
What do you believe the jury should know about your son that might help them in their decision here?
I have a piece of paper that I wrote some stuff down. Is that okay if I read off this paper?
You can use that to refresh your recollection. You cannot just, read, a statement.
It has to be question and answer, sir.
Okay.
So,
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
So, tell the jury about about your son, his upbringings or challenges he's had in his life?
Well, I'm not here to make excuses for him or for his actions. He was fatherless for.
Okay. Yeah, you understand that there are consequences to a person's actions, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And right now, it's up to the jury to determine what the consequences would be, because of what he's convicted of, is that right?
He was fatherless for the majority of his childhood. I was gone. I myself made some bad decisions, and I had to go take care of some things. But I know that he did grow up without a father for the majority of his childhood. They grew up without a mother as well.
And why is it that he grew up without a
We
mother?
were both incarcerated.
Okay,
Yes.
I see.
So they spent the majority of their childhood with my parents, whom they tried their best to raise them up the right way. Unfortunately, they grew rebellious and they did a lot of wild things. They were out of my parents' control, most definitely. There was never no boundaries. They just pretty much did what they wanted to do as children.
Tell the jury whether or not you were really a good role model for your son or not.
I believe I wasn't at that time. I believe that I was totally the contrary to being a good father. I made a lot of bad choices myself. I lived a wild life as well.
Would you attribute your wild life and bad choices to a wild life or bad choices your son may have made?
Well, again, he's a grown man now, and but I do blame myself for not being there and helping him to develop into a good citizen, a good person. I blame myself a lot for that, for not bringing them up the way that they should have been brought up.
How does that make you feel? Tell the jury, please, to see your son making the same types of mistakes that you may have made as a younger person.
My heart is broken. And I have a lot of regret in my heart,
Okay.
but I can't undo it. What's done is done, and I'm just here to support him and to let him know that we still love him and we're still standing by his side.
Thank you. Have you been able to turn your life around?
Yes, sir. Yes.
And how was it you were able to do that? What did you rely on?
Upon my release of prison, I had a great support system. My wife has been with me 100%, supporting me and helping me push for my goals in life. And I've been to several schools. I've actually worked for a fire sprinkler company, which I did for 5 years, and I now enrolled in the HVAC system, the heating, ventilation, and AC. And I successfully completed it and started working in that field for a while, for a few years, and then I decided to change my career path, and I am now a wireman, electrician for the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers here in Dallas, Texas.
Okay. And what type of support system might your son have to rely on in the future?
My son, actually, I brought him along when he was released from prison. I brought him along to work with me with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. He was doing very well. I did notice that he had some issues with his mind that he maybe needed to get right. A lot of mood swings, a lot of change of characters. But I leveled with him, I worked with him, I understood, I understand the process of integration. And I just try to be there to support him and to just try to correct him when he was wrong, in a friendly manner, of course.
So what would you attribute these mood swings to, if anything?
Well, I was aware that during his incarceration, he was in segregation for a number of years. A segregation is, he was in a cell by himself for a number of years.
That's ad seg.
Ad seg, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And I myself, when I was incarcerated, I was placed in ad seg for fighting for 8 days, and I almost lost my mind in that place. And to me, I mean, that's the only thing that I think impacted his mind a lot. 3+ years by himself in a cell.
Yeah. Please tell the jury what type of worker he was when you brought him with you to work.
He was willing. He was dependable. He understood assignments. He understood duties that he was responsible of. Again, I had to sometimes, you know, he would have, I guess, issues with people, and I would try to just calm him down and look, this is the way that we handle these type of situations, and he would get that. He would understand, and he would calm down and change his.
Now, does he have a union membership?
Yes.
Okay. So as do you, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So he does have verifiable and verifiable trade, is that correct?
That's right.
Electrician?
Yeah, he was an apprentice at IBW.
Okay. Is there anything else you feel the jury should know about your son in reaching a decision as to the consequences?
A lot of things were said about him, and a lot of the evidence is overwhelming to my wife and I. It's definitely not the person that we know. He definitely has an issue with drugs. I don't believe that he was acting like he was drunk. I believe that he was intoxicated. I believe that altered his decision making.
Yeah, you did sit through the trial and you saw the evidence that was admitted to the jury, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury how that made you feel, seeing that evidence and these accusations.
It broke my heart for the victims more than anything. Yeah.
Thank you, I'll pass the witness.
Just very briefly, Your Honor.
You may. Cross-examination.
You were aware that on October 18th of 2012, your son was involved in a drive-by shooting, right?
Yes, sir.
And you're aware that it was a gang-related drive-by shooting, right?
Yes, I understand.
And you're aware that an old man was shot while mowing his lawn.
Yes, sir.
You heard testimony that his life has been forever changed, right?
Yes, sir.
And then you're aware that Alexander Guzman went to prison for 10 years.
Yes, sir.
And his sentence expired on October 18th of 2022.
Yes, sir.
So within 325 days of his sentence getting expired, he robbed somebody again.
Yes, sir.
And he shot multiple times, right?
Yes, sir.
And then 9 days after that, he robbed somebody else and shot them in the back.
Yes.
No further questions.
Any redirect?
So it's your understanding that your son served 10 years for a 10-year sentence, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Pass the witness.
No redirect, Your Honor.
Yes.
We'll recross our.
That's all. Thank you, sir. You're free to stand down and rejoin your family. Please watch your step. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. You may proceed.
Ma'am, please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your name.
My name is Paula Guzman, Paulaguzman.
And Ms. Guzman, how are you related to Alexander Guzman?
I am a stepmother.
Okay. Now, are there certain things you'd like to tell the jury that should be taken into consideration as they are passing sentence on him?
Yes.
Okay. Tell the jury what type of person Alexander is.
Well, he's been in my house. He has 2 younger siblings. I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old. And he's always been caring with them. He's always been protective of them. He's given them advice, especially my 16-year-old, because he's a teenager. You know, teenagers start to rebel, especially boys. They try to test the lines. And he's given them good advice. And he's like, you know right now, it's the best time of your life because you're young. He goes, you can have your mom, you have your dad, everybody's looking out for you. Just fly straight. So when he came home, he stayed with us. He was working. He would go to work every morning. I didn't have to wake him up. I didn't have to. I was like, do you want me to pack your lunch? No, he had it packed the day before because he was ready to go to work. He didn't want coffee. I didn't have to do anything for him because he was up at the time. He knew he had to be out that door. He was out the door. He was going to work. Never had an issue with him staying there. He always, when he got paid, what do you need, groceries, whatever my kids would, he spoiled them. If I told him you cannot have soda, well, you already had enough soda, he would take them to the store and go get them soda because they're really his younger kids, and he was trying to show them that he loved them, well, so to me and my husband, it was really heartbreaking yesterday.
So how long have you been in his life? As I understand, you're the stepmom.
Me and my husband been over 22 years together. We're gonna be 23 this year.
Okay. And tell the jury whether you love Alexander just as if he was your natural son.
Yes, I do. I love him just like it was my son. I mean, he practically grew up with us as well. You know, when he was with us, he was with us. And he would go back to his mom on alternate weekends. But I've always treated him like he was my son because that's the way I see it. He is my son.
Well, tell the jury how you felt seeing videos and the evidence and the testimony about things Alexander has done.
It really broke my heart out. I don't see him doing that. I've never seen him. Me being a stepmom, you would think, you hear these horror stories how stepkids don't want their stepmoms or anything and they fight. I've never had an argument with him. I've never had him disrespect me in any way. So to me to see that, it was just like a whole different person.
And you understand, of course, that there are going to be consequences, you know, to his behavior. Is that right?
Yes, I do.
Anything else you feel the jury should know or take into consideration before making that decision?
I understand, I believe, yes, there are consequences. Everybody makes mistakes. You know, I also believe that you get caught up with people and situations. And sometimes you make bad mistakes. I've made a few, but I've never said that, or I don't believe that people can't change. I believe if you're given the opportunity and the way, if you need classes, to take classes, If you need to go see a psychiatrist, if it's given to you and you take that opportunity, you can change. Anybody can change. We're not a creation of our elements. Like, if he was incarcerated and he did SAG for 3 years by himself, imagine, sometimes we can't even sit alone for a minute, just being quiet. Imagine 3 years by yourself. That's going to mentally impact you. And I think that when anybody does that, regardless of who they are, they should receive some kind of mental evaluation classes, something to help them get back into society. Because that's the hardest thing, is you get used to doing one thing one way or another for so many years. Then all of a sudden, hey, you're thrown out here to the world, fend for yourself, figure it out. With no job, no anything, and it's up to you to figure it out. And a lot of people, they don't care. That's your problem. That's basically what you get. You get a lot of shut doors, and that's what you have to fight through. And I'm saying this from experience, because when my husband got out, he had a lot of shut doors. And he wanted to quit so many times because of those shut doors, but I kept pushing and pushing. And this is the same thing that happened to him. He had shut doors on him, but we kept pushing with them.
Tell the jury whether you believe that Alexander can become a productive member of society, you know, after a prison term.
Yes, he can. I've seen not just my husband, but I've seen other people as well. They come home, they have support. If they have the support system, anybody can change. Anybody can. Nobody, I don't feel like anybody's a waste of time, or anybody is a done deal.
Is there in fact a support system for Alexander when he completes his punishment time?
Yes, we have a space for him in our house.
Ask the witness.
Just briefly,
Cross-examination.
he was living with you at the time, right?
He was living with us when he was working, when he got out of jail, prison.
And you had no idea that he was doing these robberies, right?
No.
And do you think he's setting a good example for your children?
When he was with us, he wasn't doing
Do
anything
you
like that.
think his
No.
actions are setting a good example for his
Those actions, no. And I told my children that. And he's told my children that as well.
No further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Judge.
Thank
I
you.
may have one more
Please watch your step getting down from the witness.
I don't have any other non-party witnesses, Judge.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm going to send you back to the jury room just for 5 minutes, and we should have you back in no time.
All rise.
Mr. Jameson, did you want to?
Yes, Judge, by way of admonishment, my client, who is still under oath, and explaining to my client he does have the option to testify on the issue of punishment if he wishes. He has informed me that he does not wish to testify. Is that your decision, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Are there any objections, additions, deletions regarding the court's charge and punishment from the state?
No, Your Honor, we accept it as it is.
No, Judge.
All right, and I assume the defense will rest when we bring it
Yeah,
back?
yes, Judge.
Okay. All right, then you can take a couple minutes to, relax.
Judge, back to the bathroom.
Sure. I wonder if we have to end up in access. Ooh. Yes, we're still streaming, but.
Where's the X?
It's there, but I didn't think that was. Will the state open punishment argument?
No, Your Honor, we'll waive it.
All right, Mr. Sutherland.
Yes, Judge.
All rise.
seated. All right. Mr. Jameson, please call your next witness.
At this time, the defense will rest.
Does the state have any rebuttal witnesses, or do you close?
Stay closes, Your Honor.
Close.
All right, you may be seated. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've now heard all the evidence that you are going to hear in the punishment phase. I have the court's instructions to the jury, just like we did this morning. I will read these instructions to you, and then we will have arguments of counsel, and then you will be excused to consider your punishment verdict. Court's instructions to the jury. Members of the jury, the defendant, Alexander Guzman, has been found guilty by you of the offense of aggravated robbery. The court has received and accepted your verdict of guilty, and you will no longer concern yourselves with the issue of whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. You will now limit your deliberations under all the law and the evidence in the case to the question of punishment, which it is now your duty to assess. The range of punishment. The defendant has pleaded true to the prior enhancing conviction alleged in the indictment, which states that he was finally convicted of the felony offense of aggravated assault deadly weapon in the 283rd Judicial District Court of Dallas County, Texas, in cause number F1267505 on the 15th day of August, AD 2013. The court hereby orders you to find the prior enhancing conviction to be true, and so state by your verdict. The range of punishment for the offense of aggravated robbery with a true and prior enhancing conviction is by imprisonment in the institutional division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for a term of no less than 15 years, up and through a term of no more than 99 years or life. In addition, an optional fine not to exceed $10,000 may be assessed. Evidentiary instructions. You are instructed that in assessing the defendant's punishment, you may take into consideration all of the facts and evidence admitted before you in the full trial of this case, and the law submitted to you in this charge, and the charge heretofore given you by the court. Fifth Amendment right. In a criminal case, the law permits the defendant to testify in his own behalf, but the same law provides that his failure to testify shall not be considered as a circumstance against him. You will therefore not consider the failure of the defendant to testify as a circumstance against him. You will not, in your retirement to consider your punishment verdict, allude to, comment on, or in any way or in any manner refer to the fact that the defendant has not testified. Extraneous offenses or or other bad acts. You are instructed that if there is any testimony before you in this case regarding the defendant having committed offenses or bad acts, acting alone or as a party, as that term has been defined, other than the offense of which you found the defendant guilty, you may not consider such evidence unless you find and believe beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed such offenses or bad acts, if any. The burden is upon the prosecution to prove such extraneous offenses or bad acts beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution's proof must exclude all reasonable doubt concerning the extraneous offense or bad act. Therefore, if you find and believe beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed an extraneous offense or bad act, then you may consider such evidence in assessing the defendant's punishment. If you do not so find, or if you have a reasonable doubt as to whether the defendant committed an extraneous offense or bad act, then you may not consider such evidence, if any, in assessing punishment. Instruction regarding parole. The length of time for which a defendant is imprisoned may be reduced by the award of parole. Under the applicable law in this case, if the defendant is sentenced to a term of imprisonment, the defendant will not become eligible for parole until the actual time served equals 1/2 of the sentence imposed, or 30 years, whichever is less. Eligibility for parole does not guarantee that parole will be granted. It cannot accurately be predicted how the parole law might be applied to this defendant if sentenced to a term of imprisonment, because the application of that law will depend on decisions made by parole authorities. You may consider the existence of parole law. You are not to consider the manner in which the parole law may be applied to this particular defendant. Conclusory instructions. You are further instructed that your verdict must be unanimous and shall be arrived at by due deliberation and not by drawing lots or any other method of chance, nor shall you add any combination of figures and divide the answer thereto. You are the exclusive judges of the facts proved, the credibility of the witnesses, and the weight to be given their testimony, but you are bound to receive the law from the court, which is here and given you, and be governed thereby. During your deliberations in this case, you must not consider, discuss, or relate any matters not in evidence before you, nor should you consider or mention any personal knowledge or information you may have about any fact or person connected in this case, which is not shown by the evidence. You are instructed that any statements of counsel made during the course of the trial or during argument not supported by the evidence or statements of law made by counsel not in harmony with the law as stated to you by the court in these instructions are to be wholly disregarded. You are instructed you are instructed not to use any cellular device, smartphone, computer, or tablet during your deliberations. If you have a verdict or if you wish to take a break, turn on the red light and the bailiff will quickly respond. Signed by me, judge of this court. And the next page has the verdict form, which reads, we the jury, having found the defendant guilty as charged in the indictment, find the prior enhancing conviction to be true and assess his punishment at imprisonment in the institutional division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for a term of blank, write in either a number of years that is not less than 15, but no more than 99, or life, and or assess a fine in the amount of blank, write in either an amount not to exceed $10,000 or none. And there is a place for the presiding juror to sign and then print her name. We will now have arguments of counsel. Mr. Jameson.
Thank you. May it please the court?
Yes.
There will be no quarrel with the verdict. You made a decision. This is not the time to quarrel with that. I wonder now what it is that you would like to hear from me. Yes, I would like to tell you that this man grew up as a Boy Scout, that he had two parents in the home, a mother and father. I'd like to tell you that he was on the honor roll, in the book club. He had a library card. He was a straight A student, but no, that's not the case. And some people do not have that fortunate in upbringing. We're all a product of our upbringing. And is it any surprise that he has an absent father? He's not in the household. Why? Because he's in prison. Is it any surprise that his childhood, his youth were different than what most of us might expect or hope for? Is it any surprise that if he doesn't have a father figure at home, that he turns to gang members or turns to gang members to be a substitute for the father, for the guidance? Now, you have a very tough decision in front of you. I mean, is this just a throwaway life? Should we just throw away this man's life? Or is there any redeeming quality in him? He does have a family that loves him. He does have a trade. He does have a union card. He does have the prospect of a high-paying job. He has family members that want to help him rehabilitate. A lot of times on these trials, you come down here and people so cut off from their family, they don't have anybody to come down here and speak on their behalf. This family, you may have noticed, has been sitting in the courtroom every day of this trial. Why? Because they care about him. Now, that's no excuse for what he's done, and we all recognize, they recognize too, as does my client, Mr. Guzman, that there are consequences to behavior. Now, it's your decision to decide what those consequences are. And obviously, if the state attorneys and I and Mr. Guzman could agree on that, we wouldn't need you. But it's your decision to decide, do we just throw this man's life away, or is there a redeeming quality, redeeming opportunities for this man? Now, let's look at this man. He looks like in his 30s. You know, if you assess a sentence of, 15 to 20 years, then he'll probably be pushing 60 or so by the time he is released. Probably be the same age as his father, who is now 62, that led a similar type of life, that was in prison, that did have ag-seg being administrative segregation, and he talked about what it does to your mind, what it does to your psyche, what it does to your self-respect, to build up that type of feeling within you that you need help. And yes, you can reach for help. You've got family, you've got psychologists. There is help available for people. There's help available for this man. But if his father can serve a prison sentence and come out and be a productive member of society, Alexander Guzman will be the same age as his father when he got out of prison. And he has shown you that yes, it is possible with the family's support to become a productive citizen and to become a better example for others. Yes, Mr. Guzman has younger siblings, 16 years old and younger. And while what he has done right now has not been a good example, just as his father was not a good example to him, but I believe others can learn. Now, it takes anyone can learn from their own mistakes, but it takes a smart person to learn from the mistakes of others. And that's the hope for our future. That's the hope for the future for this man's siblings, that we're not going through this type of case again in another 5 or 10 more years, or at some point the cycle does have to break. Now, if you want to put an exclamation on your verdict, go ahead and write down $10,000. That's the maximum fine. Now, per statute, you can't consider less than 15. I would suggest to you that a sentence in the range of 15 to 20 years would be appropriate. Now, you ought to be oath to follow the law. You must give reasonable consideration to the whole range of punishment. Now, the state will probably be talking about the maximum. I'm going to be talking about the other end of the punishment. You should give reasonable consideration to the low end of the punishment if you feel that is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson. Mr. Grant?
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the jury, sometimes it's hard to do the right thing. That's what he was talking about. Well, this is going to be hard. It wasn't the guilt innocence stage. I mean, you guys came back pretty fast. It was pretty easy. This is the hard part. And it's the hard part is doing what you think is right. All 12 of you represent this community. You're You're responsible for the safety of the community. You're responsible for setting a tone for the community. And you're responsible for just letting the victims of crimes know that we will not tolerate this kind of behavior in our community. And unfortunately, Alexander Guzman has caused a lot of harm to this community. A decade ago, he was involved in a drive-by shooting in which an old man was shot while mowing his lawn. That man's life, you heard, has never been the same since then. Since more than 10 years ago, his life has not been the same, and he has to wake up every day not being able to properly lift his arm due to the actions of this man. And then you found out within less than a calendar year, Alexander Guzman got out of prison and did the same thing again. He did the same thing to 2 victims. On September 9th, or on September 8th, he saw Freddie Leha just in his apartment checking his mail. Freddie Leha went there, he wanted to get out of there, he wanted to start his new life, he wanted to kind of move on from that community. Where he was met by this defendant. This defendant shot in his direction and at him 3 separate times. Yet, that victim came in today, or came in yesterday, despite being scared, because he knew that he had a duty also to be there for his community. He knew he had to be there so you can do your job. And then, less than 9 days later, he does the same thing. He goes back to the same apartment complex, targeting the same people. Then you heard testimony about what the composition of that community is, the Cantera Crossing Apartments. You heard it's about a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. You heard the community typically is one that doesn't like to call police. They keep things to themselves because they're scared. He targeted that community. And you have a duty to let them know that you will be there to protect them. How many is too much? How many times do people have to get shot? Is it the next time somebody gets killed? What if that bullet that hit Ricardo Servant hit his spine instead of going through his back? Would that change your answer? Instead of focusing on the results of the robbery, you just have to focus on the robbery. Because when you're shooting a gun and you hit somebody, it's dangerous no matter what. And we can't wait until the next time. And so I have to ask you to do the hard thing. I have to ask you to start at 99 years and work your way down if you find anything. Because for me, this is somebody who can't be trusted in our community. You have a duty to speak for the community, and you have a duty to protect it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grant. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are now, instructed to retire to the jury room and consider your punishment verdict.
All rise.